What is going on today, guys? It's been a long time since we've talked. It's just been really busy on my end, and I'm sure on your end as well. But I wanted to take the opportunity today to do a video. I did have a print order come in, and I wanted to do that in conjunction with showing you guys some of my post-processing tips. It's actually one of the most requested videos I get, which blows my mind because I feel like I don't do anything too crazy or too unnatural editing-wise. But I do think there's a couple things I can show you that maybe will be beneficial to you as well. So what I want to do is I want to jump in on the screen. I want to explain the print, what I'm doing, who it's going to, and we'll go through the whole process from when I import the photo, and then we'll edit it up, we'll export it, and then we'll take it downstairs and we'll print it. I do want to talk a little bit about printing later. I feel like it's a lost art, and I feel like it's an entire third of the entire photography experience that's just normally removed from what we do. You know, you got the capturing of the photo, you got the editing, and then that's normally where it stops, or it finds a home on a digital device somewhere, and then that's the end of it. For photography, you really, in my opinion, you really got to put it into something tangible. You got to make that photograph something tangible, and for me, that's print. Something about a big, large print of a photograph I take makes it just so much more powerful. So let's jump in on the screen right now, and we'll get after it. Okay, so the photo you're looking at now is of a juvenile bald eagle with its nictitating, I can never pronounce it. It's the membrane that comes down over the eyes. You'll see this a lot in predatory birds and raptors and things like that. You also see something similar in a shark. On impact, you see that eyelid come down over the shark to protect their eyes. This is the same concept. It's to protect the predator's eyes, normally on impact or things of that nature. So I had a friend who ordered this print, wants it 24 by 36, which is a pretty decent sized print, and I want to do that all in-house. So let's jump into it now, and we're going to walk through my editing techniques. So I got it open here in Lightroom, just like I'm sure most of you guys start in Lightroom. At least that's where I start. I go Lightroom, Photoshop, and then if I need to, I denoise it. This case, let's talk about settings real quick. It was shot at 160 ISO at 600 millimeters and then f4. So it was shot on the Nikkor 600mm f4 at 1/640th of a second. I'm not going to denoise this because the ISO is so close to the native ISO of the camera that there's really going to be no benefit. The thing is not noisy at all. I'll come in, I'll zoom in 100% here, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. There's really not a lot of digital noise. Let's jump into it. All right, so we got the image in front of us. Stepping back out. I feel like the exposure overall is good. I'm not going to adjust too much on the overall global exposure, but I do want to up the contrast. So every time I shoot RAW on the Nikon D850 at least, it sucks the contrast out of the photo when I put it back into Lightroom and it goes to its native setting. It just looks really uncontrasty, if that makes sense. So I'm going to stick around 25. That looks good. It looks a little overkill right now to me, but we'll do some other adjustments and it'll come around. Next, we're going to drop a little bit of the highlights. I was exposing for the dark end of the feathers, so I didn't want to lose any of that detail. So the highlights are a little blown out. Nothing too crazy, but that's going to be probably the biggest adjustment I make. Really want to keep all of those highlight details in the feathers and right there along the beak. So that's what we got going there. Next, I'm going to lift the shadows. I don't want to lift the shadows too much. Like I said, I exposed for the dark portions, so the shadows are actually already pretty much there. I'll bring them up a little bit so you can get some of the shadow recovery here up in the darker feathers. But then whites, maybe a slight adjustment. Black will kind of bump up the contrast just a little bit more. Now here's a tip that I do. I never use texture or clarity. I never do any sharpening in Lightroom. I feel like Lightroom doesn't do a very good job. Photoshop is so much more of a powerful program for that. But I will dehaze just a little bit, and the purpose of the dehaze is just to give there's a little bit more separation between the animal, in this case the bird, and the background, kind of giving it that nice portrait blurred gray background. Vibrance, I do a little bit of vibrance. You could come down here and do it globally, color by color on the HSL sliders. Not doing any of that. Depending on if it's a dark photo, sometimes I'll do the profile corrections, but on this case, I feel like the vignette caused by the profile correction not being selected kind of makes it more dramatic. So that's it. You just kind of saw how basic my my overall global adjustment is. What I might do is take my my little paintbrush here, and I'm going to lift the shadows in the membrane, all those cool veins and everything that we were talking about a little bit earlier. I want to be able to see that on the print. So when we get down to printing a little bit later, I'll explain to you why I'm lifting the shadows there, because you don't recover as many of the shadows in a print when it's not a backlit screen. So that's what I do here. So that's it. That's all I got for Lightroom. I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it over to Photoshop, and that's where I'm going to do the majority of my dodging and burning, all of my sharpening. You guys know me, I like to put that little bit of a border around my photo. I feel like it kind of frames it a little bit better. So we'll jump into all that, and we'll see how it turns out. All right, guys, so it looks like it's reading camera raw format right now, so the transfer is almost complete. There we go. So we have it coming up here in Photoshop right now. Give it one more second to think. There we go. So we have our full image after our camera raw adjustments that we did in Lightroom, edited, opened up into Photoshop. Like I mentioned earlier that I wanted to print it 24 by 36. So before I do any adjustments, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the image size of it. Now let me slide this over here where you guys can see what I'm doing. So here's what I want to do. This is the original size at 240 ppi, or ppi. I do need to make this 36 by 24. Now the issue is the resolution's only at 229 ppi. Normally the standard when I print is 300. I just don't necessarily have that much resolution in this photo. It's not cropped at all. It's just that's all the camera put out. There are some programs, I'm not familiar with them, that allow you to resize the photo. You can actually make the photo larger. Since I don't have any experience with that and I don't necessarily want to screw it up, I'm just going to make the DPI suffer a little bit. The dots per inch just a little bit less than 300. But you're looking at, what, 8200 by 5500 pixels. That's a full non-cropped image from the D850, so that should be more than enough information to go print it 24 by 36. So you're not going to see any adjustment there, but the actual image size is now 24 by 36. First thing I always do is you got to go ahead and make a new copy. So just slide that down there and you're just recreating the same image twice. I told you guys I don't ever do any sharpening in Lightroom because I feel like Photoshop does just such a better job, and I'll show you guys how I always sharpen all of my photos. I grabbed the lasso tool, make sure you got your whole image right there in front of you, and just select your subject, whatever that is when you're doing this. It doesn't have to be incredibly precise, just kind of the general outline of whatever it is that you're trying to sharpen is going to be more than sufficient. Sometimes I get like really in the weeds with this trying to make it perfect, but I've realized after some comparisons that it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So there we go. I've selected just the outline of the bird of the head. That little nick in the beak really isn't going to make much of a difference. So let's wait for that to go and give me the marching ants right there. Next you're going to hit Command or Control J, and all that's going to do is take your selected area and it's going to throw it onto a new layer, and it's going to be its own individual layer in your Photoshop. So let's give it a second, and there we go. So right now, you're not going to see anything different, but if you look at layer 1, it's what we just did. It's the cutout of that. Now here's the trick. Here's how I sharpen all of my images. Come down to Filter Other High Pass. Now what this is it's just micro contrast between the lights and the darks. When the camera takes a photo, when you got all those tiny pixels that make out a straight line, the contrast between the light and the dark is what this filter is sharpening. So if you look at this, let me bring this over here. I got my high pass. 2.1 is pretty much the most I'm ever going to do. You can make it start to look like Lightroom does, where it's over sharpened and it looks fake. 2.1 is where I normally leave it. And if you look, right now I'm just sliding this little view box around the eagle, and you can kind of see how it's taking that micro contrast of the feathers, in this case the veins in the eye, and I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to throw that overlay on. Now you're looking at this like, what in the heck? So all you got to do now is you got to just change the overlay, or I'm sorry, you got to change the layer from normal to overlay. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to step in so you guys can see what I'm talking about here with the sharpness. So this is with the layer mask on, or with the sharpening mask on. Off, I really want you to focus in here on some of the details, or look at some of the finer feather details along the eyelashes, and then on. So what you're seeing is it's not inducing a whole lot of artificial noise, and it's not over sharpening in my opinion. It's just kind of breaking down that micro contrast. So this is how I sharpen all of my images. So we'll step back out. It doesn't look, in my opinion, over sharpened or unrealistic or fake or anything like that. It looks exactly how I want it to look. Now in this case, since the focus of this image is going to be this membrane, I'm going to select the eyeball one more time, Command J, throw that on a brand new layer as well, and then I'm going to overlay it again, just not to the same extent. I really want those veins in the eye to be as sharp as I can make them when I print. Now granted, you do lose a little bit of sharpness when you print, obviously, especially when it's not 300 DPI. It's 240, I think it was, something like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bring this down to 0.8. So it's almost a third of what we did on the overall image, but I'm just double tapping that eyelid. And then come back down here, normal to overlay, step on in one more time, and you guys can really get an idea of just how sharp that little overlay mask is. So that's all I do for sharpening. Now what you're going to do, what I do next is select the top, hold shift, come down, and then Command E or Control E, and that's just going to compress all the layers into one. So there, my sharpening is done, my resizing is done. What do I do next? You're going to come over here, you're going to grab your background layer one more time, and you're going to add another copy. I'm going to show you guys how I dodge and burn. So there we got our background copy on our new layer. Come over here to Edit, and then slide it down to Fill. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually, let me bring this over here. I'm adding another layer, almost a paint layer, if that makes sense. It's a gray, 50% gray layer over the background. It's an identical copy of the background, but what that's going to allow me to do is dodge and burn on a paint layer, essentially. So let's go ahead and throw that on there. Same thing as before, you're going to think you screwed something up because your whole image is going to go gray. If it'll hurry up, filling right now, and then there we go. So what you got? Come on. There we go. So what you got is this gray layer, and you're like, oh man, my picture's gone. Just come down here to normal, overlay, bam. If you look down here on the right, you're going to see that we have this background copy. Now when I turn it on and off, you're not going to see any difference, and that's perfect. That's what you want. Now my next step is make sure you have your background copy with the 50% gray fill selected, and come over here and grab your little fine brush tool. And this is where you can get tedious. I'm going to do a little bit of it with you, and then I'll probably fast forward the video so you guys can just see how I'm doing it, and then the overall ending of the dodging and burning. So let's start with dark. So you always want to make sure you're using black. Come up here, opacity. I stick it around 9%, 8-9%. Anything above that, and you can kind of tell it's painted, and it doesn't look so dodged and burned. So there we go. 8. Flow is 100%. That's fine. Let's bring this brush size down because I really want to get into the details of this. So let's come into the eyeball, and let me show you how this works. So all I'm doing right now, whether you can notice it or not, is I'm just darkening some of the features. What I like to do is I like to darken what's dark and light what's light. There's nothing overkill about what I'm doing. I'm just adding a little bit of micro contrast in, but I'm doing it in a way that is very in particular to each individual image. So what you're seeing right now as it's happening is I'm just darkening up some of the shadows. And I'm going to do the same thing with the highlights after I get done with this. Like I said, this is tedious, but when we get done and I back out and I show you guys the overall dodged and burned image, it's going to look like night and day. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this so you guys don't have to suffer through it. And then we'll look at the final image. Alright, so now that I'm pretty happy with the black, I'm just going to do one more thing where I'm going to increase the brush size, and I'm just going to do large sweeping movements on the black or on the darker portions of the feathers. So I'm just going to take my brush right now, darken up the dark parts of the feathers, and this is kind of just, like I said, broad brush strokes. I'm not looking to get too intricate with something like feathers just because you're really not going to be able to tell too much of a difference. Just trying to highlight. Actually the opposite, I'm trying to just add contrast to the dark portions of these feathers. So that's good. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to swap over to the white. So I'm going to come over here, if that little beach ball goes away, and there we go, we got our white. Come up here and I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did with black, but with the lighter portions of the image. So stay tuned, and then we'll see the final image. Alright, so it doesn't look like I did much, but let's go ahead and do the before and after. So there's before, and hit it one more time, and there's after. So I know it doesn't look like much, but I promise you, it's the tiny adjustments that you make that will just set your images apart. You don't have to do some crazy edit to where it looks supernatural or it looks completely unreal. You just want to go ahead and you want to emphasize some of the details of the photos that you're taking. Like I said, my personal style is just to keep it natural looking, but just lift some of those accentuating features. So that's literally all I do for the dodging and burning. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift E. I'm going to go ahead and smush those layers together, flatten the image. And now I'll take my image, I'll go to canvas size, and I come over here to inches, percent, 105. So this is just something I do. I just like to add a border to my images when I post them on social media or when I print them. I know you can do this when you do the print settings. You can make it to where it's borderless or not borderless. I just always like to add it. It's just kind of something that I've always done. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to File, Export, Export As. This is where you can add your watermark if that's something you're into. I don't watermark, but if you do, add it here. I'm going to export this. Slide this over here. I'll show you how I export it. The width and the height, the pixels are a little bit bigger because I added that 105% white border. It's not going to screw up the quality of the image at all because it's literally a non-detailed white border. So the image, the part that is the bird, is still the exact same pixel density. It's just I've expanded that white border on the outside of it. So everything here looks good. Scale is still 100%. I do want to export a JPEG, and quality is obviously 100%. That looks good to me. Let's hit export. And then while that's doing its thing exporting, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and unplug this laptop, and we'll head downstairs to the printer, and then we'll print this bad boy out and see what you guys think. So I'll see you guys down there. Awesome, we got the laptop unplugged. Now we're just gonna head downstairs to the basement where I keep the big printer, and we'll get this bad boy printed off, and we will have the final result. Ugh. Bottom story of this house is so creepy. But here we go, head down the hallway, and I will show you guys the print room. Alright, it's a whole bunch of nothing in here. Couple other orders I'm working on, but this is it right here. All right, so I got my gloves because I never do any printing without gloves. You don't want to be handling a lot of the paper, getting your fingers oil, grease, crap all over it. So little print gloves. I got to change the paper out right now. I'm pretty sure the last thing I did was matte, so we'll get the glossy paper in there, and then yeah, we'll print this bad boy out. By the way, yes, I am that petty where I put a Nikon sticker right by the Canon logo. Although I'd be a liar if I said Canon didn't make phenomenal things. I'm just jealous at them lately. So yeah, went full petty, put my Nikon sticker there. We'll walk you through how to necessarily change the paper in here. It's not really anything interesting. I'm just gonna change this bad boy out. I really don't want to ruin any of the paper. So for like, I think it's like $3 or $4, you can pick these up on online, Amazon, or B&H, or one of those other big photo super sellers, and get yourself a pair of printing gloves. So, she slides right off. Always got to make sure I remember how to put this darn thing in correctly. I'm gonna go like this. Alright, so now that we got the paper changed, I'm just going to feed it. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just lining up the paper with the printer so it prints straight. Just to get that little dot lined up, now we're going to close the top cover and let her do her thing. I got to make sure I select, it is glossy, weighted 170, so we will select that. Paper's going to load in there, it's going to come out, it's going to come back, it's going to do its thing. Hopefully you guys are learning something. Like I said, I really just want to stress how important it is to print your photos. Really got to print your photos to kind of tie the knot around the entire process. Get this bad boy locked in there. It doesn't have to, obviously doesn't have to be something as ridiculous as a 36x24 in-home, but just if you get like an 8x10 or you get any sort of at-home photo printer for like less than $100, I promise you, just having a tangible printout of your photo is going to, it's going to make you a better photographer. Because once you start printing things, they look totally different on print than they do with a backlit LCD screen. So, paper's ready. She's 42-inch roll, ready to go. Let's get this laptop set up and print her out. Alright, so we got the laptop, super professional setup. You see here, you know. It's what they do in all the professional print shops. They lay on the floor and do it. No, it's just, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make sure everything is hooked up as it should be. Do one more quality assurance check, and then let's print some pictures. Alright, so while this does its thing, let's talk recommendations. I think that it's really imperative that all photographers, let me set you down here, all photographers actually have a portfolio, and not a portfolio online. So I do most of my sales, if you are wanting to get into print sales, I do most of those in person. Whether that's like a gallery setup or in a restaurant. We have something called a First Friday, where you go and you put your stuff up inside a small business and then it sells that way. But very rarely do I sell anything based off of something someone sees online. I don't have a website, and I know that's a failure so far on my part. I just haven't seen a return on it. But having an actual printed portfolio, something that you can show people and they can turn and they can get that texture, that tactile experience with your art, really helps sell stuff. So if your goal is to print your stuff and sell it out, I'd highly recommend investing into a printer. And like I said, it doesn't have to be something as asinine as like an 8400, but just getting something that can print. Like I know Canon makes one that prints like, what is it, 13 by 19? It's a couple $100. I will always recommend printing. Print your artwork, even if it's only for you. If it's something you keep a portfolio. I think it's really going to help you become a better photographer. But this is almost done. We're going to lay it out. I'm going to show you the printed version of it, and then I'll show you the final image up here on the screen, and hopefully you guys took something away from today. But let's see how it's going. There's that membrane that we were trying to get so sharp. Really see all those vein details in there. Oh, I think the guy buying this print's going to be pretty stoked with it. I know I'm stoked with the outcome. Hopefully he is too. Yeah, this one's almost done, so we'll get it laid out for you. Oh yeah, this looks really good, guys. So all the details there, you can see kind of why we brought up the shadows, and we brought up that extra just because of how how much darker it is when it's printed. But that's really all I have today, guys. Throwing up the last image right now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay tuned. Next week or so, we're going on a really big trip. We're going to do some pretty cool photography, so I look forward to seeing you guys then, and be safe. Hope you're doing well, and cheers.